I think an interesting perspective to take on postmodernism and cultural Marxism is to consider what it is not. And one of the things that is definitely not is conservatism. And if you want to understand what conservatism is, I don't think there's a better person to listen to than a man named Roger Scruton. So I'm going to provide some quotes from him. This is the first one. Beauty is the ultimate value, something that we pursue for its own sake, and for the pursuit of which no further reason be given. Beauty should therefore be compared to truth and goodness, one member of a trio of ultimate values. It's a conservative ideal is that truth, goodness, and beauty go best together, let's put it that way. You're going to find the ultimate of each one of those when you consider them together. So if you compare that to the postmodern perspective, that there in fact is no such thing as the truth, there is no such thing as reality, you have a stark contrast between postmodernism and conservatism. Next one up. Conservatism starts from a sentiment that all mature people readily share, the sentiment that good things are easily destroyed, but not easily created. And here I think he's talking about basic democratic values like freedom of speech, equality of opportunity, independence of the media. But it's certainly destroyed it in relation to the CBC, who now acts as a mouthpiece of the Liberal government. But yeah, I think this is a good one. Conservatism starts from a sentiment that all mature people readily share, the sentiment that good things are easily destroyed, but not easily created. Roger Scruton, I think, probably devoted more of his life to the preservation of beauty, especially in its traditional forms, and especially in terms of architecture. And in England, he probably did more to preserve the brilliant architecture of the past than just about anybody. Anyway, that leads me to the next quote. We are needy creatures, and our greatest need is for a home. All our attempts to make our surroundings look right through decoration, arranging, creating, or attempts to extend a welcome to ourselves and those we love. At bottom, conservatism is a love for the precious things that we possess in our civilization now. It's not opposed to change. What it is opposed to is destructive change. And therefore, it sees changes being something that should happen slowly and very thoughtfully. Next one up. Whatever our religion and our private convictions, we are the collective inheritors of things both excellent and rare. Uh, in terms of democracy, people should at least understand that it's a really rare thing. The default position of humanity is some form of tyranny. So what we've accomplished is a rare and precious thing that we ought to be determined to pass on to our children. As you'll see, I'm going to start again. Whatever our religion and our private convictions, we're the collective inheritors of things both excellent and rare. And political life for us ought to have one overriding goal, which is to hold fast to those things. By this, I think he means things like freedom of speech, merit-based hiring, independence of the judiciary, transparency and accountability in government, parental rights, sane border policies, national pride, that sort of thing. And he says that our goal should be to hold fast to those things in order to pass them on to our children. It's a beautiful sentiment, I think you have to agree. And in this next one, he's talking specifically about postmodernism. Nonsense confiscates meaning. It therefore puts truth and falsehood, reason and unreason, light and dark on an equal footing. It is a blow cast in defense of intellectual freedom, as the optimists construe it, namely the freedom to believe in anything at all, provided you feel better for it. The worst example of this that I've seen is the reluctance that people have or the inability that people have to be happy to discover that there were 215 kids weren't murdered and buried in clandestine graves in Kamloops. They're not happy about it. They seem to be. It seems to make them happy to think that that actually happened. It's an extraordinary thing, isn't it? I just find that absolutely remarkable. You very rarely ever hear anybody celebrating the fact that that didn't happen. And it's clear now that it didn't happen. Here's a good one. Free speech is not the cause of the tensions that are growing around us, but the only possible solution to them. Uh, the Kamloops story is a brilliant example of this as well, because with, say, for example, residential school denialism laws, or the fact that in universities you can't talk reasonably about residential schools, or the Kamloops story without, perhaps being fired or ostracized. That's just going to lead to more tension. People aren't going to put up with that. And so what you have to allow is the freedom of speech that's required to have a sensible debate about things. And if you can't do that, tensions are going to get worse, conflicts are going to increase, and it's not going to be a happy outcome for anyone, including First Nations people. Here's an interesting one. While we're familiar with the effect of drink on an empty stomach, we're now witnessing the effect of drink and drugs on empty minds. Here he's speaking about Marxism directly. The contradictory nature of socialist utopias is one explanation of the violence involved in the attempt to impose them. It takes infinite force to make people do what is impossible. The experiment has been tried. Communism doesn't work. It takes infinite force to make people do what is impossible. Next one. It's not the truth of Marxism that explains the willingness of intellectual. Next one up. It is not the truth of Marxism that explains the willingness of intellectuals to believe it, but the power that it confers on intellectuals in their attempt to control the world. And since it is futile to reason someone out of a thing that he has not reasoned himself into, we can conclude that Marxism owes its remarkable power to survive every criticism. I think this next one is mine. I'm attempting to summarize what he thought. The essence of conservatism is a love for everything precious about our civilization. It does not oppose change, but thinks it should happen slowly and very thoughtfully. Next one. The first axiom of Marxist science is that everything they tell you is a lie. The second axiom is that you are lying too. The third axiom, kill all the liars. Next one. But this experience taught me that our civilization cannot survive if we continue to appease the Islamists. I would just add to that the communists, the cultural Marxists, the postmodernists, the Chinese Communist Party, etc. Here he's talking about Islam as well, I think. Once we distinguish race and culture the way is... Sorry. Here he's talking about Islam again, I think. Once we distinguish race and culture, the way is open to acknowledging that not all cultures are equally admirable, and that not all cultures can coexist comfortably side by side. Just look to Europe, you'll find a lot of examples of that. Look at the Palestinian protests, what they're doing in North America. This is very clear. And it's something that people on the right have been pointing out for really a long time. Particularly since Angela Merkel decided to open up Europe to a flood of Muslim immigrants. Next one. For the conservative, human beings come into the world burdened by obligations and subject to institutions and traditions that contain within a precious inheritance, a wisdom without which the expression of freedom is as likely to destroy human rights and entitlements as to enhance them. Some of these things I think would take a little bit of effort to fully understand. This one really hit me. This is about postmodernism. In the need to believe, to find a central mystery that is the true meaning of things and to which one's life can be dedicated, nonsense is much to be preferred to sense, for it builds a way of life, something that cannot be questioned. No reason assault is possible against that which denies the possibility of a reasoned assault. That reminds me of things that you heard from BLM where they said, and this wasn't just BLM, I heard this quite a few times, what they said that critical thinking is white supremacy. So if you even attempt a rational analysis of things, if you encourage open debate, you're engaging in white supremacy. It's this, an example of the absolute absurdity of it. Critical thinking can be used by anybody. To imagine that that's something that could only be used by white supremacists is so ludicrous. It's beyond comprehension that anyone could think that. Especially people that have been educated were the ones saying that. That's incredible. Next one up. The American liberal is certainly not adverse to the power of the state, provided it is exerted by liberals against conservatives. That's been the case for a long time, and because people are so frustrated and angry about that, we've unfortunately got the phenomenon of Donald Trump, who is also a real threat to freedom. It wouldn't have happened, Trump would have never been elected if people weren't so sick of the political correctness that existed and that still exists in the United States. Next one, strident minorities acting on the growing disposition to censor their opponents ensure that the deeper the question, the more likely it is to be settled by shallow arguments. In intellectual circles, conservatives move quietly across the room like homosexuals in Proust, whom that great writer compared to Homer's gods, known only to each other, as they move in disguise around the world of mortals. It's being a little bit funny there. And there's an really interesting thing about him. I think it was in his video, How to Be a Conservative. They were talking about transgender rights and things like that, and he obviously found a lot of it exceptionally problematic. But what he said about himself was that, in fact, he would rather live his life as a female. If he was just thinking about himself, he would actually be transgender. And the reason that he didn't do it is because it would upset his wife. So he wasn't just thinking about himself, he was thinking about his wife. But I think it's interesting to note that the leading conservative of the last probably 150 years, he just died recently, said that. I think that would be surprising to a lot of people. This one really hit me. In the need to believe, to find a central mystery that is the true meaning of things and to which one's life can be dedicated, nonsense is much to be preferred to sense, for it builds a way of life around something that cannot be questioned. No reasoned assault is possible against that which denies the possibility of a reasoned assault. And for sure the best example I've ever seen of this is, I think it was BLM types and a few other miscreants like that. It came up with the phrase, critical thinking is white supremacy. So they're going to hold fast to their opinions. The main one probably being that the failure of a lot of black neighborhoods, for example, is the fault of racism, where in fact a lot of the failures are the result of their own behavior. especially the way that the family structure has fallen apart. They want to make the argument that all their problems are the result of racism, while you have a lot of women that have, children with 4 or 5 different fathers, and the children grow up to be criminals essentially. That happens an awful lot. But they don't want you to be able to say that. They want to censor you. They'll argue that if you make that kind of a reasoned argument, that you're just engaging in white supremacy. If you don't believe in truth, what you're going to end up with is absurdities like that.